Hey everybody, JCB here at The Awesomest, and you're watching The Awesomest YouTube channel. Today, I'm gonna make a video game using nothing but my big boy brain. Nope, can't do the Mr. Beast voice. God, that must be exhausting for him. A while back, I made a video about an AI tool I had created that completely failed. If you haven't seen it yet, be sure to click the link in the description below. Since then, I've started a new project. You see, about a year ago, my wife was handed this task at work that required this massive spreadsheet, and she's actually still working on it to this day. When she was first handed this project, she had to do all sorts of data manipulation, kind of things that are tedious and repetitive and boring. I'm talking tens of thousands of rows and columns of cells that had to be like split up and moved over, and hey, stop falling asleep. I'll get to the point, okay? The point is, we decided to do it programmatically using Excel macro code. In the AI video, I had mentioned that I know a little bit about programming, a little bit about scripting, and a little about love. So we started messing with it, and pretty quickly I realized this might be one of the actual good uses for AI. After all, if we can get this like VBA script made faster, then it can handle all of that boring crap and we can spend more time having fun, which is exactly the kind of thing people keep claiming AI is meant to do, but instead it does the opposite and just basically makes us do more work while it does fun things like make art. But this seems like the perfect use of generative AI. I wasn't super familiar with VBA macro scripts for Excel, but Gemini sure was, and knocked it out pretty quickly. And sure, there were a couple of things I had to fix. There was like some prompt engineering, and I had to do the weird thing where you over-explain the thing you're trying to accomplish, like Homer Simpson trying to use a monkey paw in a way that won't backfire, only for it to immediately backfire anyway. And even then the AI is like, oh, you want everything deleted? But anyway, when that project was done, well, I guess it's still not done, but when the scripting part of it was done, it kind of had scratched this itch in my brain. That programming itch that I'd had since I was like 8 years old, programming nonsense in BASIC on my Tandy TRS-80, which sucked. I mean, sucked in a nostalgic way, but the thing about the itch is that if you just leave it alone, it eventually goes away. But the moment you scratch it, you just gotta scratch it and scratch it and scratch it. And this has happened to me a couple of times throughout my life. One time was actually when I decided to make that AI screenplay analysis tool. Again, link to that video down below. I didn't mention it in that video, but the project started when on a whim, I wondered if ChatGPT could create an SVG file of a star. SVG files are just vectors, so it's basically drawn using what is essentially math in a text file, and there are people who know how to hand type SVGs to make cool things, but I am not one of them. And I wondered if ChatGPT could do it. That point is the SVG test got me experimenting with what people now call vibe coding. And that's basically how that AI tool got started. Eventually though, due to having to work around ChatGPT's limited capacity for context and memory, I basically taught myself how to code using AI as a teacher, and I finished the project on my own. And then it failed. Like I said, I'll link to that video down below. Another time this happened to me more recently was when I decided to try to learn C# in Unity so I could try making some games. One of which was a mobile game for babies. I also started working on this other game I've had this idea for that I really want to do, and it involves like ghosts and this really cool like game mechanic. But I was just like prototyping it in Unity and realized right away that its scope was way beyond anything that I'm competent working with. So I have to level up my skills. The problem is I'm not a game developer. I make games for fun, and I don't have a studio. So if I make games to level up my skills, who would even play them? Then I thought maybe if people saw like the process I went through to make the game, they might be more interested in trying it. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm gonna make a game, show you guys how I did it, and then give you a link where you can play it at the end of this video. First, I needed an idea for the game. Now, normally I get all my ideas from Ralph's, but they closed the Ralph's near me, so I don't have any more ideas. I knew the game had to be simple because I'm making it, and I'm a big fat dum-dum. Emphasis on the fat and the dumb and the big, wink. Anyway, I want the game to run on both mobile and the computer.
Everything's computer.
So immediately I wondered which game engine should I use? Unity? More like Unity. Godot? Hell no. And don't even get me started on Unreal, which I'm not even sure is real. Anyway, I didn't want to be stuck making a game for just one operating system. I haven't made a mobile game in more than a year now, but I know there's a giant nightmare of crap you have to climb through in order to... Wait, can you climb a nightmare? Anyway, there's a big pile of crap you gotta go through in order to get your game in the App Store, and then a whole separate pile of crap you gotta go through to get your game in the other App Store. So I figured, screw Apple, screw Google, let's just make a browser game. Because browser games can be played on mobile if you do it right, and otherwise you can play them on the computer, in the computer room, if your mom says it's okay, and she doesn't have to call your Aunt Wendy later. But I digress. So I need an idea, and then I remembered Apollo 13. Wrong clip, wrong clip. That was not Apollo 13. Apollo 13, you know, the movie about astronauts that tried to go to the moon, but then something terrible happened and the ship broke. Not like that. Basically, the astronauts had to find a way to get home without the fuel and oxygen that they would normally need to get home. I like a little resource management in games, and of course, I love arcade space games. So what if I mix a little bit of resource management into an arcade racing game and put it in space? And then I remembered that scene from Apollo 13. Sorry, I didn't mean for that to rhyme. There's a scene where the NASA engineers are trying to get the ship back to Earth, and they decide to use a gravity assist to sort of slingshot the ship around the moon back toward Earth, giving them just enough speed to get all the way home. So what if in the game you could slingshot around planets to boost your speed and help you conserve fuel while you're trying to race from point A to point B with a limited amount of gas? And then I started thinking, what if your ship was solar powered and you could recharge by orbiting stars? Then I remembered another part of Apollo 13, where they talk about how if they don't hit re-entry for Earth just right, they might skip across the atmosphere like a stone on a pond, out to who knows where in space. And I thought, well, that sure sounds like a fun game mechanic if I've ever heard one. So just for fun, let's see if Gemini can just make this for us. Hey, make a game that is a space racing game where you control a spaceship and you have to race against 3 NPC spaceships, and you can use the gravity of planets in your way to slingshot ahead, giving you a speed boost and helping you to conserve fuel, which you need in order to make it through the race. Maybe in an asteroid or a planet you die, but we also need to make sure that this game can be played in the browser, both on a desktop with a mouse and on a smartphone with touch controls. It needs to have music and sound effects and good graphics, but it has to be resolution independent, so I guess vector graphics, and make it work in the canvas so I can test it, please.
So right off the bat, the controls are really slippery, and it doesn't seem like it has the ability. It doesn't seem like it has the ability to actually orbit the planets like I had asked. I also don't particularly. Yeah, I can't orbit at all. It doesn't seem like you can get into any kind of a slingshot maneuver. And then the asteroids are all just like circles, and that's kind of, oh boy. This is really hard to control, and I don't think the NPCs are actually trying very hard either. They seem to just be crashing as well. Jeezy, crazy. I also can't shoot, which maybe I forgot to ask for that. Anyway, it's bad.
I'm actually a little annoyed with how much of the game it got right, because this was my first attempt. It's not nearly as colorful, but I'm not really going for that neon look anyway, though I'm definitely not going for this look either. So one thing I learned while I was making that AI video is that there is nothing more boring than watching someone type code into an IDE. This shit is boring as hell. And even if I speed it up, it still sucks ass. So instead, I'm gonna walk you through like major milestones so you can see the development progress over time. Now, I do want to state right off the bat that I did not make this 100% without the help of AI. Back when I made that AI tool, AI coding was hot garbage and required working with the same chat window that kids use to cheat on essays. It was sloppy and led to lots of bad code. But today, there's new tools like Claude Code or ChatGPT's Codex that are tailor-made for programming, and they're a lot more robust and powerful and a lot more accepted within like the developer community, although people still aren't like super thrilled about it. Unless you work at Meta, in which case you could be fired for not using AI to create enough lines of your code, which just seems so stupid and backwards to me. But like I said in my last video, if something doesn't take time and effort and talent to create, then it doesn't have any value. So I try to do as much of this as I possibly can, though I know my strengths and my weaknesses. For strengths, I have coding basic stuff, learning how to code more advanced stuff, creative things like graphics and music, coming up with fun mechanics and level ideas, and troubleshooting solutions to problems that arise. But the weaknesses I have are things like Newton's law of universal gravitation, vector calculus, Kepler's law of planetary motion, n-body physics, orbital mechanics, and as I mentioned, hand coding SVGs. Oh, and my last weakness, a cute girl named Ashley. So I decided to restrict my AI use to just questions about how to do things I don't know. And I decided to avoid things that I just know absolutely nothing about and would have to rely on the AI entirely to do. Like, I originally wanted to make the game multiplayer, but I have no idea how to make a multiplayer game, and I certainly couldn't test a multiplayer game in the browser using a home server, so instead you just fly against 3 NPCs that are about equally as skilled as you are. But I knew I had to use all that crazy math stuff to get the main game mechanic, and I do not at all understand it because dang am I a dumb boy. That stuff is way beyond my pay grade. Also, I'm doing this for fun, and math is not fun. So here are the rules that I follow. I would code everything I can by hand. I would learn what I could before asking ChatGPT, and when I run into an issue, I'd be allowed to ask ChatGPT what is wrong, and how to fix it. Originally, I was gonna make myself Google the problem first, but nowadays both Google and Bing just put AI results right there at the top of the page, and so it kind of defeats the purpose, and so I'm just gonna go ahead and skip that step. And you might be wondering, what will keep me from overusing AI? Well, mostly fear. There was this moment during the process where the NPCs are just slamming themselves into planets, like seemingly on purpose, and no matter what I did, I couldn't fix it. And so out of sheer frustration, I installed the Gemini extension into VS Code and asked it to take a look. It decided to delete giant chunks of my code. It misunderstood the entire code base. It misunderstood how different files related to one another. It basically set me back weeks, but it did also add a bunch of garbage code that I didn't need, so that was nice. To this day, I worry there might still be remnants of Gemini's crap hidden somewhere in my code base. Though I did figure out toward the end of the process that using codecs to check for memory leaks and inefficiencies is pretty fast and helpful. Though you do have to be really specific with your prompt, that you basically just want a report of what it thinks are like potential issues. Otherwise, oops, there goes all your work. I will be using ChatGPT as my coding instructor who can answer my questions like, why does the game freeze the moment I try to orbit a planet on mobile? And I'll be using Gemini for nothing, because at this point, I don't trust it anymore. So I got controls working pretty early on. I also have gamepad controls built in, though I haven't fully tested it on a whole lot of controllers. I know it works with the PlayStation 4 DualShock controller and this like cheap USB SNES controller, but will it work with this old Steam controller? Who cares? Basically on the computer, you point and shoot with the mouse and use the buttons to thrust, and it's pretty simple. I decided pretty early on to upgrade the graphics and had a rule against using JPEGs or PNGs or any rasterized images because, like Friends, screens come in all sizes.
Friends come in all sizes.
Basically, the larger a rasterized graphic is scaled, the worse it looks. SVGs don't have this problem. So it was important the game used vector graphics, which, as I already explained, is not really my strong suit, so I sort of cheated here. I made some drawings in Photoshop of how I wanted the ships to look, and then I used Illustrator to turn my drawings into SVGs. Then I drew characters, and at first I was just gonna use like a static image for the dialogue scenes, but then I started thinking about how much better it would be if the characters were kind of animated when they spoke. And since it was my own artwork anyway, was it really a big deal if I used AI to just kind of animate my own stuff? So I tried that and it turned out like this. But the problem now was it was a GIF, or GIF if you're weird, and I needed to turn it into an SVG. So I could export all the individual frames from the animated GIF and then one by one put them into Illustrator and turn them into SVGs, but that would take forever. And there weren't any actual like tools for then combining those individual SVG frames into one animated SVG file. So for a while there, I was gonna stick with the GIFs, which gave me an idea to use Illustrator's turntable feature for these 360 images. But in order to have the 360 animation, I had to basically screen record me rotating the model and then export the video as an animated GIF, which I wonder now if that also counts as like AI graphics, because like, does the turntable tool use generative AI, or is it like a neural network? What's the difference? Like, I just don't know at this point. So anyway, I needed a tool that would turn animated GIFs into animated SVGs, and not just like a GIF inside of an SVG container. Like I wanted actual like vector graphics that were animated. So I made a tool that does this. It's called SVG Animator, and there's a link to its itch.io page down below. If you use it and you like it, kick me a few bucks. If you use it and hate it, well, I'm sorry. This tool meant I can convert my images back into SVGs and not have to worry about them looking like crap when they're blown up to 4K. The next big thing I tackled was this gravity slingshot thing, and it was like the biggest hassle I faced while making the game. Even with help from AI, this was just a big pain in the butt. It just did not work right. Like, I'd be able to get the ship to orbit, but then not be able to get out of orbit, or if I did, it would launch it into like weird directions. Like, the guys at NASA who figured out this stuff with pens and paper are freaking geniuses. The next piece of the puzzle was getting NPC races to work, which was hard because it meant making a pathing system that incorporated the orbital mechanics so that NPCs didn't just make a beeline for the finish. And these are procedurally generated levels, so the NPCs had to map a series of nodes that they could use as waypoints in the progression through the level, or, you know, just crash immediately. And I didn't want the NPCs to just be amazing from the start, otherwise the player would like never stand a chance. So I wanted like a rubber band difficulty where the better the player gets, the better the NPCs get. And when you first start out and you're pretty bad, the NPCs would also be pretty bad. So I created a variable called skill score that goes up every time you finish a race. If you win first place, it goes up a lot. If you win second, it goes up slightly less. If you win third, it's still less than that. And if you win 4th, it's barely going up at all. If you don't finish, the race restarts, so it doesn't really matter. So this skill score would determine like how good the NPCs are at steering and aiming and just like resource management and navigating. And each NPC has like a built-in handicap at the start in relation to your skill score. So the NPCs are as follows. You have Raptor, who's like a really competitive cyborg, Dozer, who's just like this big tank dude who's all about his homeworld and nobody else, and then Starkist, who's like a super smart engineer. However, there is a bit of randomization built in. The NPCs each pick their own way through the course, and that can be kind of altered by whether or not the player or the other NPCs destroy asteroids that make other paths open up. And there's a bit of randomization to the overall pathfinding anyway. So while Raptor should be your equal, your actions and the actions of others can actually cause him to lose skill points and the other NPCs to do better. The NPCs do have fuel they try to manage, but because I suck at programming, I kind of made things easier on myself by creating sort of a cheat code where if they do get down to 0 fuel, they can basically keep flying for free until they get to a star to recharge. But that's just a failsafe, because until they do run out of fuel, their goal is to conserve it via slingshot maneuvers, which we call drifts. Speaking of drifts, I added a combo system to the game, so every time you rack up an additional combo, you get more speed, better fuel efficiency, and eventually the ability to bounce off objects and even a shield against crashing into asteroids. One thing I did notice was that after just a couple of back-to-back races, they started to feel kind of samey, so I decided to add different backgrounds and different music, and now each race has its own vibe. But that wasn't quite enough, and I really enjoyed shooting asteroids, so now every few races you enter a new mode called Asteroid Run, where you have unlimited fuel, a 5-way weapon, and you just have to plow your way through an asteroid field like the Kool-Aid Man in a drywall factory. And then I thought we need like a sort of like a boss battle type situation, so I created a wave mode where you have to like fend off like just waves of enemies flying towards you, which is kind of like the Antlion Den level in Half-Life 2 Episode 2. But for legal reasons, it's nothing like the Antlion level in Half-Life 2. It's legally distinct. Then I thought that can't be the end of the game. So then I had like more races and another asteroid run, and then I created like a dogfight level in which you and the NPCs fight against each other, which is kind of like Space War meets those Star Wolf levels from Star Fox 64.
Can't let you do that, Star Fox.
And then I thought, what if after you win the dogfight, that red dwarf in the center just collapsed into a black hole and you had to escape? And you had to fly away as fast as you can while the gravity pulses of the black hole pull you towards it. From there I added boss battles and giant asteroids and 3D cutscenes using a library called 3.js, which I had to code a whole cutscene maker for. And then I hid power-ups inside of asteroids and created like this final level where you had to fly into a ship like you're going into the Death Star in Star Wars. And you know what? Let's just let the trailer I made speak for itself. Then when it was all done, I let my brother Kyle test play.
I contemplated and actually played around a little bit with a system where every time you die, it reduced like how difficult everything should be. But then it ended up in a situation where you'd be pretty far into the game and the levels would be really short and the other pilots would be really bad at flying because you had died a couple times.
So there were some weird bugs I had to fix, and my brother actually suggested a couple of features that I added in. Plus I added Easter eggs and like a boss key, and right before I started making this video, I actually found a weird bug where sometimes when you pass a level, the results screen would shift way over to the right, like almost entirely off the screen. But overall, there was really only 2 major instances where I had to really depend on AI to get through a hurdle. The first was when I realized I made a huge mistake way back at the beginning of the process when I didn't even think about splitting up the code into different files. And I ended up with 50,000 lines of code in one giant HTML file. That was a bad idea, and I needed a ton of help refactoring the code base so I could split it up into multiple JavaScript files. That alone would have taken me months to do by hand, and it introduced all kinds of new scope errors. So if it wasn't for the AI tools I had on hand, I probably wouldn't have even attempted that level of a code refactor. It was just a huge undertaking. The second time was one of the final steps when I decided to go file by file, asking Codex to look for, categorize, and list anything that might hinder the speed and efficiency of the game. And since I wasn't doing any memory management, it found plenty, and I was able to fix them. Okay, everything's ready to go, and publish. As of right now, the game is working and live, and it's available on itch.io. There's a link down in the description below. It is a pay what you want model, so if you feel inclined to kick me a couple of bucks, I would certainly appreciate it. If you can't afford that, then maybe just, spread the word about the game on social media or spread the word about my YouTube channel. All of it helps a lot. I'm a teacher by day, and I'm about to go into an unpaid summer break, so any extra income would be super appreciated. I want to show you what's the prototype. It's only a prototype. Like, there's not much to it at all. Prototype for number 2, okay? Oh, there we go. Yeah. And these give you health, and you can boost. You can fly around, yeah. And then when you get past it, it does like a whole yeah, you won the game. But it's really, that's all it is right now. But that probably won't be my next project, mainly because Nintendo just announced a new Star Fox game, so why make a weird knockoff? But basically I just want to keep it simple for now. I want to level up my skills slowly. And I actually have an idea for a game that I came up with back when I was a little kid, and now I feel like I can probably make it. So stay tuned for that. Though I do want to say, my normal content is still happening. I'm still going to be doing, the Six Flags content and all the theme park stuff. All that's still happening. I spent a lot of time and effort on this project, and I wanted you guys to see the fruits of my labor, and hopefully some of you guys will try out the game and let me know if it's fun. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, keep being awesome. Remember back in 2022 when AI was just this strange new toy that everyone was playing with? You remember those first generation AI image generators? Where maybe if you squinted and stood back a bit, it kind of looked like the thing you asked it to create? Well, back then, messing with ChatGPT was sort of a novelty, though some people were definitely taking it too far. Essentially,